And now we have new reporting from Hunter Walker at Talking Points Memo. He uncovered evidence that a congressional staffer, the digital director for Congressman Paul Gosar of Arizona, is a prominent follower of a neo-Nazi named Nick Fuentes. You may remember Fuentes as the racist Holocaust denier who Kanye West brought to dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Donald J. Trump last year. So, what does all of this tell us? That the right in America has mainstreamed a very dangerous, violent movement, a threat to us all. And if you needed any further proof of that, just look at the tragedy that unfolded last weekend in Allen, Texas. The man who opened fire in an outlet mall and killed 8 people, including a 3-year-old, expressed interest in white supremacist and neo-Nazi views. And yet the denialism and whataboutism on the right sadly persists. Joining me now, Hunter Walker is the investigative reporter for Talking Points Memo, who I just mentioned. Ruth Ben-Ghiat is a professor of history at New York University and the author of the Lucid Substack, where she writes about democracy and autocracy. And Jamelle Bouie is an opinion columnist for the New York Times. Thank you all for joining me tonight. Hunter, let me start with you. Tell us more about your reporting. How close is this Gosar staffer to Nick Fuentes and his Gripa movement?
So Nick Fuentes referred to Chicken Right, the online persona that can be linked to this staffer, as, one of his best quote-unquote soldiers. I also watched one of these, extended Nick Fuentes streams where the chicken persona pledged loyalty to Nick Fuentes and to the white race. And there are extensive links between this online persona, which was fairly prominent, amassing over 20,000 followers in Nick Fuentes' movement, and 2 staffers, actually, in Gosar's office. When the accounts first launched, they were credited to, quote, Wade and Landon. Wade Searle is Gosar's digital director. Landon Peterson is an intern in the office. These accounts then ultimately tweeted photos that appear to be Wade Searle with Nick Fuentes when he attended a Nick Fuentes rally. They were tweeting from his hometown. They were also, tweeting indicating they were about the same age as him. So there's really extensive links, and this is not just, some run-of-the-mill follower of Nick Fuentes. This is also someone who was in internal leadership chats telling the Groypers, Nick Fuentes' movement, what was going on in Gosar's office. And he was creating these videos and content and propaganda for the movement. So this is a high-profile Groyper now working directly creating content for a U.S. congressman.
And I'm shocked that congressman is Paul Gosar. Ruth, moving from Paul Gosar to Tommy Tuberville, what did you make of Tuberville's conflation of white supremacists and Nazis with MAGA supporters and Trump supporters?
Well, it makes perfect sense because Trump has been, cultivating extremists. You mentioned the very fine, people, neo-Nazi episode. But what we've got now is that Trump is openly, appealing to people as a violent cult leader. He's not a conventional politician. He's a cult leader. And it's quite extraordinary. It's like all of the right-wing extremists from the entire 20th century, their representatives and inheritors are now, grouped around Trump. So you've got the neo-Nazis, you've got fascists, you've got people who love Pinochet and the military juntas, so the Proud Boys who wear shirts that say Pinochet did nothing wrong, all the way up to the new right, of Orban and Putin. And of course, historical racism and white Christian nationalism, yes. Michael Flynn, all of that has had a confluence around Trump. So I'm not surprised at all. This is part of the culture that is the GOP today.
And I believe Donald Trump promised over the weekend to bring Michael Flynn back if he's re-elected to office. Jamelle, while it is very good that President Biden is speaking out against the white supremacist domestic terror threat, I have to ask, where is the broader political, media, legislative strategy from Democrats, from liberals, from the left for counteracting this mainstreaming of white supremacy in front of our very eyes on the right?
I don't know if there's a broad strategy here. I think that part of what makes talking about this so difficult, you show those clips of folks on Fox News kind of dismissing this as ridiculous, is that I'm not really sure that American political culture in general has any real way of talking about this or discussing this or preparing for it. You mentioned the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, and that's instructive for a lot of reasons. First, obviously, as you said, the most deadly act of domestic terrorism in American history. But in the wake of that bombing, there was a real reluctance to talk about the racial ideology of Timothy McVeigh and the people who helped organize it. And that kind of continued afterwards. You could talk about domestic extremism, you could talk about the militia movement, but talking specifically about white supremacist ideology is difficult. And even, we're 2023, we have over the past 7 or 8 years, a number of shootings, mass shootings by avowed white supremacists or people with that ideology, from the Charleston shooting to the Tree of Life shooting in 2018 to the Allen, Texas shooting most recently. This is a regular occurrence, this kind of violence in American life. Biden is right to call it a serious threat. And yet, beyond just the political system, I think Americans have a really tough time beginning to think of it as ideological and think of it as a threat deserving a concerted response. That it's not simply people with hate in their heart. It's something much more sinister and much more dangerous.
But Jamelle, you don't need to worry, because I am absolutely sure that Kevin McCarthy is about to take action against Paul Gosar. Isn't he, Hunter?
I don't think so. I've reached out to the Speaker's office for comment. I've reached out to Paul Gosar for comment. And the only thing we've seen is Paul Gosar actually shutting off replies on his Twitter feed. And I'm not surprised by that, honestly, because Paul Gosar, as you alluded to, has one of the most, extreme histories in the current Congress. He's, sent out links to anti-Semitic newsletters. He's appeared twice at Nick Fuentes' political conference. And this was a bit of an open secret on the far right. They were tweeting about how this guy was on his staff. That's sort of how I caught on to it. Researchers in Arizona, like Haley Orion and Nick Martin, who I worked with, were chasing this stuff. We put it all together, but I don't think we're going to see action. And part of that is because of what we're talking about right now. I think Senator Tuberville said the quiet part out loud. This is the modern Republican Party. White nationalism is a part of it, and explicitly so. You see people like Gosar and Marjorie Taylor Greene, embrace the term Christian nationalism. That clip you played before where they're attacking DEI, these are white supremacist talking points. And, what my reporting is trying to do is just expose how deep and extreme this goes, and that it's actually tying directly to neo-Nazism.